Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this noontime webinar on Windows Virtual Desktop. Before I hand things off to our presenter, I'm going to go ahead and just point a few things out here. The lines are muted. We will keep them muted, and we will give some time at the end of the webinar to ask questions. However, along the way, if you happen to have any questions, there are two options that you have. To the right of you, you see a Go to Webinar toolbar. You can go to the chat tab, you can type in a question, and I can politely interrupt our presenter and ask them the question on your behalf. Or if you raise your hand, there's an icon there with a raised hand. You can hit that, and then I can go ahead and unmute that, politely interrupt our presenter, and you can shoot away and ask the question. So we'll go ahead and get started here, and I'm going to pass things off to Carlos Hernandez.
Thank you, Henry. So good afternoon, everyone. As Henry said, my name is Carlos Hernandez, and today I will be discussing and demonstrating Windows Virtual Desktop provided by Microsoft Azure. So before we get started, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I've been with NIMS and Associates for 8 years and live and work out of Reno, Nevada. I have a Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate with the Office 365 service. In my role at NIMS, I support our clients with their everyday IT needs, including managing their Office 365 services and on-premises servers and applications. Let's go over today's agenda. First, we will discuss why is this topic relevant and timely. Then a brief overview of what Windows Virtual Desktop is. Please note I'll also refer to it as WVD. We will then discuss the licensing requirements necessary to access this service from Microsoft 365, formerly known as Office 365. Take a quick dive into the benefits of WVD, and then I will demonstrate WVD in action. The demonstration will include how the end user accesses the apps and key elements of the action behind the scenes. We will include time at the end for questions, but also during the webinar, if you have questions, you can raise your hands in the webinar app or chat your question, and Henry will let me know, and we'll address questions as they arise. So why discuss WVD today? COVID-14 forced many organizations and their employees to start work from home, aka WFH. Pre-COVID, working from home was a trend that was growing, as you can see from this chart. In my news feed on my phone, I intermittently see articles entitled WFH, Here to Stay? The survey performed by Gallup found that 59% of U.S. workers who have been WFH during the COVID-19 prefer to continue to work remotely. So I humbly submit that WFH is definitely something that is here to stay. Due to this, as an organization, you'll need solutions that can allow your staff to effectively WFH. We've all become experts in using Zoom and perhaps even Microsoft Teams if you already have Office 365. Those are great communication and or collaboration tools. But today's focus is on delivering applications your employees will need. Now and in the future, your organization needs to be able to allow working remotely, but doing so securely. Additionally, your solution needs to be able to support different platforms, so your solution has to be flexible. Given WFH is likely here to stay, how can WVD assist your organization? Well, to address that, first let's discuss what Windows Virtual Desktop is. Let's quickly read the Microsoft definition and then dissect it a little bit. Windows Virtual Desktop is a comprehensive desktop and app virtualization service running in the cloud. It's the only virtual desktop infrastructure that delivers simplified management, multi-session Windows 10 optimizations for Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise, and support for remote desktop services environment. As you can see, I underlined some portions of their definition. First, let's go over comprehensive desktop and app virtualization. Earlier, I mentioned we need to be able to deliver applications to employees. That is what app virtualization fundamentally is. You may have experience already with this if you've used Citrix XenApp with Citrix Receiver app, or perhaps Parallels Remote Application Server. I also mentioned the solution needs to be flexible and efficient. The second underline is how Microsoft Azure achieves efficient delivery of Office apps, as well as additional apps you may need. For instance, in the demo environment I'll be showing you today, the virtual machines I chose already have Office installed, and that Office is optimized for Azure WVD environment. This graphic gives a broad overview of the whole WVD service. Your subscription and your control part on the left-hand side here is what your IT administrator will set up and implement. The Manage by Microsoft is the hosted elements they take care of. As you can see from the graphic, app delivery is complex and requires a few moving parts to achieve. So implementing your own servers to do this requires a bit of overhead and regular maintenance, such as yearly SSL certificates and typical Windows patching. What WVD allows you to do is let Microsoft carry that overhead and maintenance burden and allows your organization to focus on optimizing the service for your staff. In other words, focus on delivering the apps your users need and ensuring it performs to their needs. Let's now discuss the end user experience. In the Your Subscriptions, Your Control part again, you'll see full desktop and remote app. With WVD, we can deliver a desktop experience, so they click on that icon and it loads up a virtual desktop for that user with the apps we have installed on the host virtual machine. Additionally, you can also just choose the specific application you need to launch. For example, Outlook. The specific app approach is referred to as a remote app. So again, you could do the full desktop, they call that full desktop, or specific application, they call that remote app. During the demonstration, I'll show you the management and policies portion, as well as publish an app as a demo to illustrate the efficiency of delivering apps to your end users. What is great about this solution is the demo environment I will present to you today, I set up in an hour or two. So the key takeaway is WVD boils down to either delivering a full desktop to your users or specific apps. And let's discuss how we can access this service. The licensing requirements are listed in this slide. I chose the image below for a specific reason. Recently, Microsoft rebranded their Office 365 and are now calling it Microsoft 365, which tends to confuse people, including us sometimes. So if you already have a subscription to 365, implementing WVD may just require a quick licensing change and you'll be off and running. You'll see I italicized Microsoft 365 Business Premium. This is a newer license plan that is an excellent blend of the 365 services, but also includes some security elements to it. If your current licensing isn't listed, that would be a great plan to explore for your organization. Now let's take a quick look at some key benefits of WVD before we demo it. As I mentioned earlier, secure delivery is very important. WVD is a great solution because many people are already using Microsoft 365. You can leverage the identity management you're already using via Azure Active Directory. In today's demo, for example, the account I'll be demonstrating will have multi-factor authentication enforced upon it. This is possible due to Azure Active Directory, which is part of Microsoft Azure, and is the identity management portion of your 365 tenant. In other words, it's what makes everything work in the background if you already are using Office 365. And then there are additional security elements like conditional access, which is where we input certain parameters and say, you cannot launch a session of WVD unless you meet these criteria. So it allows you to get really granular with security if you choose to do so. And then I'll expand on the efficiency and scalability of WVD in the demonstration portion. The key takeaway is that WVD allows your organization to quickly scale to your needs, as well as how you want to load balance the virtual machines used for your environment. To emphasize this efficiency, as I stated earlier, the demo environment today was completed within an hour or two. For users to effectively work from home, the solution needs to be accessible. WVD works on multiple platforms, including just a modern web browser. So it's supported on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, and HTML5, which is web browsers like Chrome, Safari, etc. Microsoft Azure graphic on this slide really quickly hits the key benefits. Azure provides security through identity management and secure development tools such as conditional access. You can rapidly scale a solution to your needs and scale it back down. To access WVD, you just need internet access. For example, no need to configure and install a VPN client on your user endpoints. Finally, the solution is very flexible as it works on multiple platforms, as well as supports a multiple image server type for delivering the apps to your users. So in other words, you could install different types of servers. If you need a SQL server, it's easy to deploy. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So give me a moment to swap screens here. You could connect with a Windows desktop client, a web client, so just a modern web browser, Android client, Mac OS, or iOS, so like tablets. And then I downloaded this Windows 64-bit, and you'll see that file right here. I already installed it. So then you see this app right here is the app I installed. So I'm going to double click on that. And so a user will then log into the app. So let me get my phone ready here for the multi-factor. So if I click on the three dots here, I click subscribe, or I could click the blue button there. It's going to prompt me for my username and password. For the demo today, I'm Grady Archie. So I created a demo environment. He works at Contoso Demo. So I'm going to sign in. I'm going to get my multi-factor prompt now. So let's approve that. So then what it'll do is it'll sign in, and it's going to check for what resources we assigned to the user. So now it's checking to see what we assigned to Grady. So now it's going to deliver the app. So earlier I mentioned remote apps. That'd be Access, Excel, Outlook, Word, and default desktop is a desktop app. And if you see here on the three dots, if I go to details, I could see the feed discovery. I see who's logged in. That I have 4 apps in one desktop app, so 5 apps in total. So that's how I log into it and access the different applications assigned to my account. But you can also do it in a web browser, and I just want to show that process really quickly. So I've already signed into earlier, so just to simplify this, but you'll notice you just go to this URL, give it the username and password, and you'll get the same presentation. So I get my apps, and then I can launch them. But we're going to use the client, so let's launch the default desktop. So now it's going to launch just like Citrix would or Parallels. And now I have a virtual desktop, like a profile on one of the virtual machines I created. I logged into it earlier and I pinned some items on my taskbar. So I have, Outlook, Word, Excel. If I could open up Word, we'll be working on this file later. But see, I'm in a virtual area. I'm not using Word on my device. I didn't have to install Word. I just installed that remote desktop client and then logged in and then launched the app, and now I could work away. But let's go ahead and sign out of this. So now you see how end user accesses the environment. Let's quickly explore the scalability and how we manage user access by looking behind the scenes. So remember earlier I discussed this graphic right here, the management and policies. So we're going to discuss these now, the management and policies portion. So let me just get that window here. So this is the Windows Virtual Desktop in Azure. So this is like administrator user interface. You'll see there are 3 major elements: the host pools here on the left, application groups, and workspaces. First, let's explore host pools a little bit. So let's click on that. As you'll see for today, I created one called Webinar. So let's click on that. So you'll notice the Webinar host pool consists of 2 session hosts, right there, 2 session hosts, 2 application groups right down here, and 5 applications. Now the session hosts are the servers I created to deliver the applications. So let's take a look at that. So you see for this webinar pool, I have 2 servers doing the work on the back end, webinar-0, webinar-1. Then I'm going to discuss the application groups. So we'll go to application groups next. And so the application groups are the apps I choose to deliver. And the applications is a listing of the actual app. So remember earlier we saw we had 5 applications and 2 application groups. So here are the 2 application groups. And so if I were to click on webinar-DAG, this is the desktop one. So it's just delivering the desktop. And then within each application group, we have to assign people to have access to it. So when you assign people to it, you could do it by a group, which we did this case WVD, or individually. And I just assigned Grady so you can see it individually. So then again, Webinar Remote Apps is the remote apps portion. So again, it's an application group, and we're delivering 4 applications with 2 assignments. So let's look at the applications we're delivering. Remember earlier we had Access, Excel, Outlook, and Word. We saw those 4 apps, and that's how they were delivered to the end user. Now, after you create the application groups and the host pools, they're not going to show up for the user until you create a workspace. So let's go to the workspace I created for today's webinar. So for today, I created one called Desktop. And you'll see I gave Desktop both the application groups. So the 3 key elements to Windows Virtual Desktop is the host pools, application groups, and workspaces. But so now that you kind of have a basic understanding of how it works in the background, let's just imagine a situation where our engineering division says they need to implement a new server for our engineering division, and we want to do it in WVD. So first I would create a workspace for them. So I go to workspace and add. And this is the only thing we're really going to create. And then I'm just going to walk through the other steps. So I created a workspace. And then the next step is to create a host pool. So since it's for the engineering department, we're going to need a larger server. So I want to show the scalability elements of WVD using this demo. So again, we're going to assign it to this group. We'll call their thing engineering again. And we're going to say it's a pull type. And then maybe we have 10 people in the department. We'll maybe say a max 15 in case it grows. And say I build 2 servers. I can make it depth or breadth. If I do it breadth over 2 servers, it spreads the users out over both servers. Or I could do depth first. And so maybe I create 2 servers. And the first server, I make it pretty robust. And if they use all the resources on that, I send them to the second server. And maybe it's not as robust as the first. But that's just how those work. And you could hover over it and give you more details. And then when I'm in the next screen, I'm going to say yes. And this is where the scalability and efficiency comes in, really. These aren't going to be big enough for my needs. So if I were to click change size, I decided to go with breadth for my distribution. So I will say I want 4 vCPUs with 16 gigs of RAM. And, for my applications, that should get the job done. But say we find out it's just not getting it done, I could later change it to 8 vCPUs and 32 gigs of RAM, and that will definitely get the job done. And it allows us to start on what we think will work. If it isn't working, then we can size it up a little bit, make our end users experience a little bit better. And so if I were to keep going and I say workspace, it's not in the same division. I would just assign it to the new workspace I created. And then it would go through and do the provisioning, which takes a few minutes. So we're not going to do that right now. But that is how I would design a host pool for a new division and to do specific tasks. And then I would assign them to that workspace. So maybe they are part of desktop and engineering. So they would see apps from both groups, desktop and engineering. And then I wanted to have one more illustration to show importance of scalability. Let's go back to this, and we'll go to our VMs we are using for our current group right now. So remember, we have those 2 virtual machines that are running our webinar pool. So when I'm on the virtual machine, and I go into the properties, say we find that users are complaining just not fast enough, or it feels like it's really slow, just running really poorly. We could go to size, or maybe we have seasonal business and we have to hire a bunch of temp employees for a period of time. So we'll just scale up the server. And so like right now it is 2 vCPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, 1920 of IOPS. So let's sort by IOPS and go, okay, what do I have next? So okay, let's bump it up to 2080. It's going to increase our cost for that period of time. But then when we're done with maybe the larger servers, we then scale them back down by just sizing it back down. And so it allows us to take our servers that are serving the apps, make it more powerful or less powerful as our needs are required. Now, if you have physical servers with VMs on it, odds are you're already likely using up most of your resources, because when you first spec'd it out, you wouldn't buy too much more than you need. So you're going to probably be using most of your resources already. And if you needed to scale up with your existing infrastructure, you'd have to buy more RAM or new hardware. And you couldn't just get rid of it. So when you didn't need it, it would be nice to have, but would it be necessary with this? We could scale it back down when we're done using the more expensive server we purchased. Okay, and then one final demo to talk about WVD. So let's go back to, so I have that user Grady, and Grady calls his boss and says, I was hoping to use Publisher, but I'm not seeing Publisher on my computer or on my WVD. So what we'll do is let's give Grady a Publisher, and let's see how we would do that. So again, we go to application groups because that decides how we deliver our applications. And since it's a specific application, we want to go to remote apps and go to add, or manage our applications. And let's add Publisher in. But say you had Acrobat on here or AutoCAD or just another program, you just would have to install it. And once it's installed, you would go through the same process. But since Publisher is part of Office Apps, let's just publish it so you can see it. Hit save. So now I have additional remote app. So if I go to host pools, earlier I had 5 applications. Now I should go to 6. So if you look here again, you see I still have my 2 session hosts, but now I have 1 more application and still the same 2 groups. So how does that work though for the end user? So what happens on his end? So let's swap back to that screen. So give me a second here. So I call Grady back, say, hey, you should have that app now. Just click on your 3 dots and click refresh. It's going to go check his feed and hopefully pick it up, unless the demo gods are not liking me today. So there we go. So now you see he has Publisher as an app. So let's go ahead and launch it. And so he was developing a document in Word, but he wanted to use maybe more graphics and whatnot. So that's why he went to Publisher. Okay, so let's just go blank, and then we'll minimize. So you'll see at the bottom of my screen here, I have the publisher icon and then that little circle with the two green flat marks. That means it's a Windows Virtual Desktop app. It's being delivered to me virtually through the WVD service. So let me open up Word, and I have an image in this document I want to cut and paste in here. So these are being delivered from the WVD. They're both at the bottom of my screen now, and you see the little icon indicating their WVD app. So when you launch a virtual desktop app, you'll get these icons at the bottom. So I have Word open, and I have the two little lines. Then I have Publisher open, I have those circle with the two lines. So indicating it's a virtual desktop app. I have it fully maximized, so I'm not sure why it shrunk. So let me just change back to clean share. So he likes this image, and he wants to cut and paste it into the publisher file to start on what he's working on. So two different apps, virtually delivered. See, they could talk to each other, cut and paste, fine. One thing you're going to be like, well, can I print from this environment? I'm going to hit Control P. It's going to use something called printer redirection. So if I click here, you'll see that's my home printer right there, the Dell. So it does see my printer, it says it's ready. If I wanted to, I could print to it. If I go File, Save As, since we're in Microsoft 365, I have access to all the other services. I have my OneDrive, I have my sites, I could share it. So let's go to Sites, click on our demo environment here. So let's do it to my OneDrive. I'm going to open my desktop app from the web browser now, instead of the client, just to show I can have them both at the same time. Let's submit. And I should have that file in my OneDrive here. So there's that publisher file. So I could click share and then use the OneDrive Office 365 sharing versatility just through the WVD environment. And so, anyone with the link edit, or, I could specify people in my organization only. And so other than the fact that it's virtual, other than that, it operates just like regular other Office programs. I have OneDrive in my virtual profile. It's syncing and doing those things just like you would on your own desktop. And that concludes the demoing the product for me today. I'll have Henry open up the mics and let me know if you have any questions about this or about just Office 365 in general. And since we were discussing Azure and Microsoft today.
Okay, we have a hand raised. I think it is Glenn.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. So thanks for this. Just what kind of bandwidth does a typical sort of end user need for this to be successful and to have it run pretty smoothly?
So for users, when you're streaming services like this, usually everyone has decent download. You just want to make sure they have a decent upload pipe. So maybe at least 10 Mbps up. So like my home internet's 100 down and 11 up. So I'm not going to have any issues. But if you have like DSL and you only have 2 or 3 up, you're not going to have a great experience. It's not going to be terrible, but if you want a better experience, maybe at least 10 up, which is going to be most cable providers. Many people in the Bay Area or larger cities have fiber connections, so they're going to be lickety split. Yeah, no, I'd say 10 up.
Yeah, and if you translate that into a small office environment,
Yeah, so if
people working on the same pipe, I guess, is that something you can quantify, or is it just too? Anyway, thank you.
Yeah. I think for a small office, if you had 10 up, you probably could support 10, 15 people. If you didn't have 10 up, it's probably going to mean you have terrible download. So I would suggest at least getting a service where you have better internet. Because even if you have using Office 365 with Exchange and whatnot, it's going to really chew up your bandwidth anyway by the other services.
Thank you.
No problem.
So, I have another question, since if that's
sure.
Okay. So for the file sharing component of this, it seems like you're focused on the apps and the virtual desktop. Just so I'm clear, and I apologize a little late. So for the file sharing component, you're just basically using the SharePoint and the OneDrive. So you just have that set up for that for the file sharing. Is that correct?
Well, yes, for the demo we did that, but let's say I don't know if you're say in the engineering example, we'd probably use a server for that. So maybe I'd fire up a server 2019 for my virtual machine, and maybe also make it a file server, or maybe you really have a lot of files and you prefer to work from like a shared drive in the WVD rather than OneDrive or SharePoint.
We're
We could,
currently using local shared server, and so I'm trying to figure out how this sort of works on the cloud.
So say it's server 2012 R2 or something. If it's a new enough server, you should be able to virtualize it and just move it up, and we can use that as the base. Or you build a new server, like a file server, and then migrate the files to it and the applications it may need if it needs applications. And then that would be within the WVD environment. And then the users, through Active Directory, we can map like certain drives to them, or they would just do the file click Explorer app from the WVD, and then they could find the server, an on-premise server.
Thanks very much, Carlos. That covers it for me. I'd love to talk to you guys a little bit about this further offline. So I'm not sure how that works, but.
We have another hand raised. I think Brian has a question. Brian, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yep, I got it. Hey, Carlos, how you doing?
Not bad. How are you?
So, question on the price licensing arrangements. We have, I think it's the Office 365 E3 now. Is this to use this? Would you have to move up to that premium license? And then also, is there like cost for the cloud usage for the virtual desktops?
So the servers are where the costs come in the WVD. And when I was on that, let me actually bring that back up. So when we're here, so each server has its cost, and you could do innovative things like there's a script they have published where we could tell servers to turn off at night on off hours or whatnot. In this screen somewhere, there's supposed to be cost calculator. I don't know where it didn't pop up. I think scroll down. You could go here and figure out your costs. This is a pretty insane environment, 500 users, that's $12,000 a month for that. But if you look at that, they have, in this example, they have huge servers, 16 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of temporary storage. And so each server has a cost. So what we were working with was, this is what we were working with. So, 0.832 an hour as opposed to 0.192. So it just depends on what you're asking of it and how many servers you build. And that's where like the load bandwidth comes in. Say you think you do need 2 servers for your users, but you want to make only maybe one of them larger. Maybe we make one the 166 an hour and then one just the 8 gigs. So if we get overflow onto that second server, then it's not as expensive. In the case of a file server for a small business, usually you're only going to have to fire up one file server, and so you'll have that monthly cost for the server itself, and then the licensing for the users to be able to access it. And so there are, in that slide, there is F3. So the one I mentioned, the only thing I don't know about is the mailbox size, but E3 and the one I italicized are same cost, $20. So that's why a lot of people have E3 already. But I don't know if that one has a terabyte mailbox. I think that's the only, or 100 terabyte, 100 gig mailbox. That may be the only difference. But other than that, so like in my scenario, like maybe you bring on temp staff. So F3 is for frontline staff. So this would be the cheapest way to get in. So this can get into WVD, and that's at $10 a month. The one that I think are going to fit most small clients is this one, and it's $20 a month. And so it's got all the elements of E3, but it throws in some additional stuff. So what you also get into it is these cybersecurity and threats, and then some information rights policies. So remember I discussed security. They call it IRM, Information Rights Management, and that all comes through Azure. And I think this also has Intune in it. And Intune is mobile device management. So it's like a really great product. If you were interested in it, and something seriously considering, see we have the WVD, conditional access, the information protection, Defender is that security stuff, and Intune is a device management. And the only thing I'm not sure about is the mailbox size. So let's go to, just don't know if it tells me. Yeah, so the difference between that and E3 is E3 has 100 gig mailboxes. So let's say you do use E3 and you have users who are actually going over 50. You could look at the other, so like for those who want to use calling in Teams or go kind of more robust in that, there's Microsoft 365 E3, which is a little pricier, but it has the 100 gig mailboxes and the WVD. And so this, you get the 100 gig mailbox. And so I would switch them to that because generally that 100 gig jumps at about $8 if you do it itself, I think. So I just think for most clients, Business Premium is a good fit. Plus you get the Intune and all that stuff.
All right. Thanks, Carlos.
No problem.
Okay, and we have another hand raised question or comment, and again, it will require unmuting on your side. Pat.
Hey there. Hey, Carlos, you want any comments about application compatibility with stuff other than the Microsoft built-in apps?
So you can install, say we needed Adobe Acrobat and QuickBooks. Like a good example is if you use Right Networks, they generally, what they do is they deliver QuickBooks through a similar method. And say you subscribe to that. I'm going to bring this up with a client today because they want a server. And I'm like, you know what? I think I want to pitch this. But I could install QuickBooks on that server and then just deliver QuickBooks as an app. Just like, at NIMS, we deliver our time and tracking app. We deliver, and we can install ConnectWise on there. But for the demo, I focused on the built-in ones emphasizing the apps. But yes, we could do other applications as well as other images like Linux devices if we needed to and whatnot.
Great. Any applications that you've come across that are not compatible?
Not that I'm aware of, but it's an excellent question. I think if it works on Windows Server, it's going to work in a WVD, unless it's a legacy app that's not supported on newer servers. But, that's people have to upgrade eventually, right?
And do you see this as a full-time desktop replacement or only when you're working from home or mobile, or what do you see the deployment usages for this?
So I see it, why I like it as a product, and I think it's very useful, is say in a situation where you need to onboard staff, but maybe funds are tight, you're a nonprofit or whatnot. Nonprofit gets great processing for 365 stuff. Instead of buying someone a full Windows laptop, we can purchase Chromebooks for our users. And then you can put Office apps on Chromebooks, but it's just not as effective. So then I could use WVD to deliver the apps to them. Now, for a user who has a Windows desktop, has Office installed through 365, they don't maybe need to use that. But say they're in their accounting division and they need to use QuickBooks, but we need QuickBooks on a server because multiple people use it. And you can't do QuickBooks over a VPN. It's just not going to work. So we're going to publish it in one of the WVD servers, publish it as a remote app, and then that's how they get to QuickBooks. So it's a way to securely deliver apps that replaces Citrix, which is kind of moved away from the SMB market and moved towards larger environments. And it allows you to maybe, at a minimal cost increase, leverage your Office 365 licensing you already have and allow you to deliver apps to your users that, are supported in the platform, which again, if it's on a Windows server, it's going to work.
Thanks. And just out of curiosity, how would you compare and contrast this with application delivery systems on Amazon?
I don't delve into Amazon too much, but why we chose this for this presentation is a lot of our clients and a lot of people already use Office 365. And so identity management's really, important these days. Like at NIMS, we've made a, sincere effort to not only make sure we're multi-factor, but something really great about Azure. And this isn't Amazon, the other providers too, but they allow for SSO. So say we did have different apps, like in our case, we use something called Screen Connect. We could use SSO, so use our Azure identities to authenticate to the other apps. So you don't have to, have multiple user accounts, and it just leverage what you already have instead of maybe something new.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks.
As well as other accounting apps as well, right, within organizations.
Yeah, so like, if you have Mass, you can install Mass on a server and stream it just like you would do back in the day with Citrix. But like I said, Citrix was our solution of choice in the past, but they've really just kind of left the small business market. So this is WVD is a few years old, but it's just a really nice solution and they're doing a really good job. Microsoft is investing a lot in their cloud services.
Any other questions?
Okay, if no further questions, in case you forgot anything we've covered today, this webinar will be posted on our technology channel on YouTube. We'll send you a link to the channel following the webinar, so feel free to check that out. as well as some of our other videos on remote and cloud service tools. Like I created one on Teams on there, so you could see that. Other than that, thank you for your time today, and hope everyone has a nice afternoon.
Thanks, Carlos.
No problem.
Thank you.